Hello everyone, this is Jessica from Cities Digital, and Cities Digital webinar called The Word. We're going to go over tips and tricks for using Microsoft Word with Laserfiche today. This is going to be a collaborative webinar, and it's put on by the consulting department, and we're going to go ahead and get started. Alright, so for today's webinar, you're going to be speaking with myself, Jessica Welsh. I am a project manager here at Cities Digital, and I have been working with Laserfiche for a little over 12 years now, I think. And we'll also be talking with Justin Steen. He's one of our project managers here as well. Likely many of you have worked with him on different projects with Laserfiche as well. So let's talk a little bit about Laserfiche and where it's come from. Some of you have been using Laserfiche for almost as long as I've been working with it, some of you maybe even longer. And those of you who have know that when we first started using Laserfiche, it was really mainly a document repository for scanned records, right? So you scan things in, it replaces your file cabinet, makes you digital, makes you more secure, and makes you searchable. But in recent years, with the release of Laserfiche version 9 and 10, we've really started to implement the product more deeply within your organization. You can move backward into your processes and start capturing your content earlier and start working with some of your working documents, which brings us to necessarily bringing in Microsoft Word. Right, Microsoft Word is a critical application, just like Laserfiche is for all of our users. And so what we wanted to do is just kind of explore that a little bit more. For some of you who may have started with Laserfiche in its most basic capacity of just storing scanned documents and maybe not adopted some of these newer capabilities, we wanted to make sure that you see what's out there and see what's possible and see what the capabilities are. There are a lot of different options, and we're just focusing on one particular core component of the integration with Word, as well as now the somewhat newer feature of being able to use workflow to populate Word documents. So it's come a long way. Laserfiche has come a long way, and we want to make sure that you all are empowered to come along with and make sure that two of your most critical applications in your business are working together as much as possible and you're getting the most out of that. So for today's webinar, we're going to try to make this a little bit more interactive than some of our other ones, and we're going to incorporate discussion at the end. In the meantime, we are going to do a short presentation that's going to go over, first of all, we'll talk about the Microsoft Word integration. Then we'll talk about versioning in Laserfiche. We've had a lot of questions lately about versioning, using versions, what's the point of using Microsoft Word versions in Laserfiche, what are the advantages of that. We'll talk about using best practices on really collaborating on documents in Word. We'll talk about workflow and Microsoft Word, how to get metadata or information from your documents in Laserfiche and push them into a Word document. And then we'll talk about examples, things that we're currently implementing, things that are popular right now within the Laserfiche community and using Microsoft Word. And then toward the end, we'd like to open it up for questions, suggestions, ideas. People can share things that they're working on in this capacity so that we can all learn from each other. And during the course of this meeting, if you do have any questions, we have a question area of your GoToWebinar screen. You can sure put your questions up there, and we'll try to get to them. And we will probably answer them at the end, though. This presentation will be pretty short, so we'll answer and address all the questions and comments at the end. If you're having any trouble hearing me or can't see the screen, also feel free to raise your hand or put that into the chat, and our facilitator will be able to make adjustments. All right, so let's begin. The first area I wanted to talk about was just using Microsoft Word in Laserfiche. The out-of-the-box Laserfiche client, when you install it on your workstation, you automatically get a Laserfiche tab in your Microsoft Word application, and you get a ribbon for Laserfiche. So let's kind of look into this. In case you haven't seen it before, you have the ability when you open Microsoft Word and start creating a document to save it to Laserfiche. In addition, if you've already saved a Word document to Laserfiche, you can open it from Laserfiche and check it out to save a local copy, be able to edit it later. Or you can save it back to Laserfiche as a new document or a new version, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute here. You also have the ability to add or adjust Laserfiche metadata right from Word. You just click on the metadata button. It launches the normal Laserfiche metadata window where you can choose a template, fill out your fields, and then that will send that information back to Laserfiche for you. In addition, one of the lesser used features of the ribbon includes this quick content. For anyone who has worked with mail merges before, this might be kind of familiar. You have the ability to insert tokens and refresh them if you change your metadata from Laserfiche and from your template into your Word document. So this is kind of on-demand content that will be in your Word document. All right, so here is the dialog that pops up when you go to check out a document. Let's talk about checking out for a minute, just because checking out a document from Laserfiche actually downloads a copy of that editable file into your My Documents. You can see the default location here in the screenshot, which is My Laserfiche Documents. And that just means that that document now in Laserfiche is read-only, and you have the ability to have a local copy that you can edit on the fly as you go through. Maybe it takes you a few days to get through it, or maybe you have to go on a plane or something. You want to be able to edit it while you're flying. So you have the ability to check it out, but you can also leave a comment in this window so that other people know why you have it checked out. That will remain in read-only capacity in Laserfiche until you check it back in. This is good for version-controlled documents. So if you have a document that you're tracking versions on, every time you save that document, you create a new version, except if you have that document checked out. Then you can make all of your edits and only have one version created. If you're going to a conference and you want to bring that document to share or to work on while you're there, you can take it with you, as well as taking work offline or doing your homework. All right, so here's where you can save a new version in the Microsoft Word ribbon. When you save to Laserfiche, you have the ability to click Save it as a new version. This can either turn on version control if the document wasn't under version control before, or it can just create a new version in a version set that already exists. When you do that, you have the ability to add a version comment. So this is kind of like where you check out, right? You say what you did to that document and why it's a new version. And then you can also add a custom label. So if you wanted to put your initials into the label, you could certainly do that, and that is recorded in the metadata of the document for other people to be able to see. Versions are good for creating agenda items, for instance, where a initial document is drafted, but then it gets routed to other people in the organization for collaboration or approval. Could be used for contract reviews or approvals, where, again, somebody creates it, but other people need to add to it or approve it or review it. This is a good thing to use in conjunction with a workflow where people are automatically notified when versions are updated. It's good for working files, so if you have something that you're editing over time until you get to the final version. And it's good for templates that are reused over and over that you want to make sure you have the most updated copy of it, but you don't necessarily want to get rid of the history of the document. All right, so versions have a lot of really neat features, and these are continually evolving. So I just wanted to take a moment to show where these are in their most current functionality. So as we look at this kind of compilation screen that I've pulled together here, this top number 1 is the version metadata window in Laserfiche. And what I'm showing here is the ability to compare two versions. So I have 4 versions of my document, and you can see the metadata includes who created it, when, if I added a custom label or comment, and then what the changes were. So as metadata in Laserfiche, it will tell you what was updated. Did you make updates just to the document, to the Laserfiche image pages, or to the field and templates? So what I can do is I can select 2. You can see there, it's pretty light gray here, but I selected number 4 and number 2 and press this compare button up above. And then what I can see is what the changes are. So I can see specifically which pages were changed. I can see that none of the text or annotations were changed, but that 2 fields were changed. If I click on this dynamic link up above here, it will launch the Laserfiche document, and even if I don't have track changes turned on in Word, it will highlight the changes between the 2 versions for me to be able to see. So this really takes some of the version control that used to only be available through Microsoft Word and presents it through Laserfiche. So if you're using a lot of working documents with Laserfiche, this would be a good way to use versions and to be able to take advantage of some of those change tracking features even if you're not using them in Word. Alright, so that is pretty much the overview on versioning. The next thing I'm going to talk about is quick and easy data merge, but before we jump into that, I'm going to kick off the interactive portion of the webinar, and we're going to release a poll. So I'm going to make an active poll here, and I'm going to launch it so you have the ability to provide a little feedback to a quick question. So I'm going to give a poll is open now, so we're going to take about 1 minute here to just kind of collect a little feedback on how you might be using versions. Results are pouring in. Up to 75% now. Almost everybody. All right, so versioning. Just so you all know what the exciting results are. The options between using versioning for tracking your own changes, building documents with others, or reviewing the work of others. 34% of you use it to track your own changes. 59% use it to build documents with others, and 31% to review the work of others. So for the most part, we're using it to collaborate on documents. At Cities Digital, we use it primarily for building documents with others as well as reviewing the work of others. Anybody who has had a statement of work or received a statement of work for us has experienced the output of a versioned Laserfiche document that was used for collaboration and approval. Alright, so the next thing I want to talk about in the Laserfiche ribbon is a quick and easy data merge. So this is that area of the ribbon where you have the tokens and a drop-down. Oh, oops, there we go. So then in the tokens area, if you click on this, it drops down to a menu of available pieces of metadata, basically, that you can put into your document that remain live and are updated. These are similar to if you've ever used the Word feature for quick parts or auto text. It's really similar, it's just that the text is coming from Laserfiche. So you can see if you have an organization where maybe you store your information digitally, but for some different various reasons you have to print it out and distribute it to people, and you may want to include things like the path or the entry ID as dynamic information. These are things that you can create and insert into your document using the tokens. So you can see I chose here repository path, And you can see that within our Laserfiche system, this is where this document is stored. You can use things like template name or document name. You can have the person who created it or the last time they modified the document, as well as template-specific field information. There's the up-close view. Alright, so this is good for inserting path or last modified by in a footer if you need to keep that information available and up to date. Every time you hit refresh on that toolbar, that information is double-checked back to Laserfiche and the most current information is provided. You can use it to insert name and address into on-demand correspondence. So if you have a Laserfiche, if in Laserfiche you store a Word template or a letter template, if you want to be able to create an on-demand letter, you would be able to do that using metadata update. All right, so that is the conclusion of the discussion about, or the demonstration and webinar part about the Word integration. I'm going to switch over to using workflow and Microsoft Word. So one of the most requested features of Laserfiche was the ability to push data from Laserfiche into Word, right? This is amazing for automatically generating correspondence or reports or just any number of things. Being able to have that information into an editable document is so important. So what Laserfiche finally did was incorporate the ability to push information from Word into, or from Laserfiche into a Word document automatically using workflow. So this is a series of newer activities in workflow. This is the kind of sequence that you would go through if you were trying to set up a push to Word from workflow. First, you would have a Word document that you would generate as a template. And there's a few different ways that you can replace text from your Word file from Laserfiche into your Word file. But you would update that Word, create that Word template, and then load it onto the server. And then your actual workflow configuration looks like this, where you have the update Word activity. Then you create a separate entity which will be the result of that Word template plus your data that you're working with at the time. And then you would attach the two. So this kind of creates that new entry with the information merged into it. One other thing that you can do that's really neat if you start using workflow with Word is you can create conditional routing or conditional creation of those documents, where if you have, in my example here, an awesome document, it creates a certain set of text. But if you have a more awesome document, it goes down the second path and creates a separate set of text. So awesome versus not awesome might be not the best example, but you could do it for different types of contracts or different types of reports that you send out or different types of correspondence based on, say, the client type. So there's a lot of different ways that you could use this to make your documents still form-based, but auto-generated through workflow and conditional based on the data that you've already been entering into Laserfiche. Alright, so once you get into the nitty-gritty of setting up your Word document and mapping out what information you want from Laserfiche to go into what part of the Word document, this is what the window looks like. The setup of this is point-and-click configurable. It doesn't require programming. It just requires a little bit of patience and working through the process. And so I am showing the screenshot, but I'm not going to go through an actual configuration right at the moment. But you can see what I'm doing here is the type of merge I'm doing is called a simple field merge. So this goes through individual field names and tells the Word document which metadata or which tokens from my workflow I want to insert. And then I just go through each one of my variables and put in a token. And then I have the ability at the bottom to choose a few extra options which make your document look really polished and nice. You have the ability to remove kind of empty values, which if we were using what previously was available in Workflow, which was just a PDF merge, you would have kind of empty spaces or things that didn't quite line up right. But with the Word integration, you can remove those so that it looks nicely formatted and like it's containing only the information that was intended. The other thing we can do, which is nice, is a table merge. So for my type, I would just choose table field merge. And then I would be able to set, so if I want to merge a table, I would choose a data file. Then I would be able to merge my region, or I would have set a region in my Word document where I want this information to be merged. And then I just have my list of fields and my values that I want to plug in. And then I have the same information down here that I can clear out unused information or replace content so that it looks correct even if all the content is not populated. Alright, so that's the brief overview on how to use, or what the Word integration looks like, what the configuration screens look like, what the workflow activities are that you would need. So let's talk about how some of these can be used in the real world. So what I'm going to show you is kind of a walk through the process of how you might actually use this based on things that we're configuring and working with clients on right now, or things that Cities Digital has used. So the first one is using versions for collaboration and approval processes. Looks like this is probably the most common use for the Word integration. And what it does is, sorry, I'm going to start with the overview. I've proposed here just a new contract process. And so it starts when the contract is drafted in Microsoft Word. You save it to Laserfiche using the ribbon. Workflow then sends that contract to the director via a shortcut link emailed to them. They can either approve or deny it. If they deny it, it goes back to the submitter as a new version. If they approve it, it goes over to legal, where they can also approve or deny it. They save a new version. If they deny it, it goes back to the submitter. If they approve it, it goes through maybe to DocuSign for a signature, if this is something that you've done. And that's the end of the process. The finalized contract can be stored in Laserfiche as the signed copy. All of a sudden your whole contract process can be digital, it can be tracked, the history is available, you can see how long each step took. So there's a lot of different advantages that go in here, but it all starts with saving that Word document and tracking those versions in Laserfiche and getting the workflow to support it. There's just a little closer view of the first step. Alright, the next one is using the Word integration to generate documents that are available on demand. This is the letter mail merge feature. So for example, we want to, in this diagram, create form letters in Laserfiche using a business process. For those of you who aren't your organization's designated workflow administrator, business processes are workflows that you can run on demand with either a toolbar button or a right-click menu. So this process starts with selecting the recipients using a Laserfiche search. So let's say you send just a renewal letter to everybody at the start of a new year to let them know that you've launched a new product or you have some news. You would do a Laserfiche search for all relevant contacts. Then you would run the business process to generate the letters. The workflow steps for that would include retrieving the field values for each entry, selecting the entry's metadata, and then collecting signatures if necessary. then you send the letters out. And then the letters themselves that have been generated are stored into Laserfiche. And that is the end of that process. And with that, before I get into the very last one here, I'm going to launch one more survey, which is about using workflow to update Word, and whether that's something that your organization is interested in or has already done. So take a couple seconds to collect your opinions, and we'll kind of share it out with the group. We're asking this just because this is something that's newer, and so sometimes things that are newer can be helpful if you have some either examples to work off of or training, and so we're trying to kind of assess where people are at. Looks like most of the people have answered, so I'm going to go ahead and share the answers. Looks like 18% of you have already done this, 41% are interested in doing it on your own, 27% are interested in doing it with professional help, and 14% are not interested in it at this time. So, okay, very good. Well, I will go on to the last example here. This one is kind of a more integrated solution. So this is taking another product and then pushing information from Laserfiche forms. So you collect the information using an e-form, and then you send that information through workflow to a Word document. So this would be, an example might be getting an application from a member of the public or from a client, or filling out initial paperwork for, say, a new employee or a new client, and then being able to push it to a document that you can update and send through an approval process before finalizing it. So in this example, the Laserfiche form submission is the beginning of the process. Then workflow collects those form variables and then sends them to a Word template. The steps for workflow include retrieving the form variables, modifying the Word document, and then email notifying the next person in the process if this were to go on to, be more editable, edited by more people or approved. So workflow then routes the Word document, and then the finalized document is stored in a Laserfiche file. So this is a way you could possibly get people to do some of that data entry for you, or be able to at least capture that information that's getting entered at the beginning of the process and use it later on without having to retype it or copy-paste it. All right, so that is the end of the presentation, or at least the formal presentation that you see here. So what I'd like to do now is just kind of open it up for questions and discussions. There's a couple of example questions that you have up there, but both Justin and I are available to take if you have specific questions or if you have any comments that you'd like to share out with the group as far as how this is used or what's possible with it. We're happy to take your questions. All right, the first question is whether this is available in version 10, and it absolutely is. So the next question is, what version of Forms is this integrated with? And so Forms doesn't send directly to Word. It sends form variables to the workflow, to Laserfiche workflow. And then the activity that's available in Laserfiche workflow is what collects those form variables and then allows them to be pushed into Word. So if you have forms, I think any version of forms, so 9 or 10, then you can send that information and workflow can collect it. I think you may have to have version 10 of workflow to be able to collect those form variables. All right, I am not getting any more questions, so if you have any last minute ones, you can let me know, or if you have any other comments or questions, you can certainly feel free to send them in via email. And our email and contact information, as well as any attachments, will be sent in the follow-up to this webinar. So if everybody has your questions answered, then I will go ahead and close out for today. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We really appreciate your time, and if you are interested in learning more or would like more information, definitely let us know. Thanks, everybody.